Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, February the 3rd, 2025. Today, Mercury makes a trine to Jupiter. At the same time, the Sun is exactly halfway between 0 degrees Capricorn and 0 degrees Aries. 0 degrees Capricorn is the solstice, 0 degrees Aries is the equinox, so 15 degrees Aquarius is right between the two. And I think that is an important point. And you could say that it has some linkage with the Celtic festival of Imbolc, which was on Saturday, February the 1st, and that is certainly something I want to discuss. But before I do that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Monday, February the 3rd, 2025. So here is the chart for February the 3rd, 2025, noon, New York time. And you can see that the moon is in Aries. There it is, 23 degrees Aries. It's making a square to Mars in Cancer. So moon in Aries is a fairly impulsive sign, wants action. Square Mars, that kind of emphasizes the point, doesn't it? So for some of us, it might actually be quite an angry day when we're looking for action. And at the same time, if things aren't going our way, we might want to express our irritation. And it might not be just us who are irritated, it might be other people. So, we need to be careful that we don't tread on people's toes unless this is something we really want to do. So just consider the possibility that other people emotionally may be, I won't say unstable, but certainly emotionally they might be, on edge. So that's the moon. Although the moon in Aries is kind of sextile the sun in Aquarius. That's beginning of the day. More if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but we have kind of got moon sextile sun, which perhaps takes some of the edge off that moon square Mars. And if we can try to focus on the moon sextile sun, I think that would be a good thing, because Aquarius and Aries have an affinity with one another, and moon sextile sun can be about harmony and feeling that we are at one with our environment, with the masculine and the feminine being in balance with one another. Now, aside from the lunar aspects, we have a trine aspect between Mercury and Jupiter. There's Mercury at 10 degrees 56 Aquarius, and it's making a trine to Jupiter, 1117 Gemini. And Mercury trine Jupiter in air signs, it's a nice aspect. It allows us to say what's on our mind, and it's in air signs, and so it provides perhaps a bit of a contrast to that moon square Mars. Moon square Mars is potentially quite an emotional aspect, getting angry, but do we always have to be angry? With Mercury trine Jupiter, it's a very logical aspect, so perhaps we can make a special effort to be logical about our thoughts and what we think and what we believe, and try to talk things out. And Mercury trine Jupiter is also about ideas. We might have good ideas that we might be able to really sort of work with, and we might be inspired to do something about it. So I think that overall that Mercury trine Jupiter is fortunate. From a relationship perspective, that Mercury trine Jupiter is often particularly good for traditionally, in terms of traditional 12 sign astrology, for the signs ruled by Mercury and Jupiter. So that would be Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius and Pisces. But I think all of us can benefit in terms of relationships from that Mercury trine Jupiter, because it just allows us to talk. It allows us to express ourselves, without necessarily getting too emotional. But as I've just said, we have to be a little bit careful about that moon square Mars. Then we've got Venus quintile Jupiter. So quintile, 72 degree aspect, and There's Venus, and if you count it out, it comes to 72 degrees. I mean, you can see it actually if you look. There's 60 degrees, Aries, Taurus. That's a block of 60 degrees. You add 11 degrees, that takes you to 71, and then Venus is right at the end of a Pisces and end of Pisces, so that's your 72 degrees. And 72 degrees is 1/5 of a circle. And Venus and Jupiter together are a very fortunate combination. And with this Venus quintile Jupiter, at first we might think, not much is going on, there's a lot to be pessimistic about. I don't know what the markets are going to be doing by the time you watch this. I mean, I'm doing this video on Sunday, and people are very concerned about Donald Trump's tariffs and what the impact on a stock market is, and that does, for some people, creates a certain amount of pessimism. I mean, that's just one aspect of why one might feel pessimistic. There are lots of other reasons why one could feel pessimistic. It depends what you're interested in. But with Venus quintile Jupiter, it's a very positive pairing. And quintile is a somewhat artificial aspect. It's what we're trying to create. And with Venus quintile Jupiter, it's about wanting to be positive, wanting to be optimistic, trying our very hardest to see the best in things, and it doesn't necessarily all come together all by itself. It doesn't. We have to force it, and there's nothing wrong with forcing it sometimes. I mean, I'm not suggesting you put a smile on something just because, and in fact, it's a completely miserable situation. That's something I would never do. I'm not going to sugarcoat any pill. However, this Venus quintile Jupiter may indicate that a little bit of effort, even a little bit of sugarcoating, trying to make things positive, might actually be a good idea. And then we have the Sun at 15 degrees Aquarius. Exactly 15 degrees Aquarius. And that means the Sun is halfway between 0 degrees Capricorn and 0 degrees Aries. And so it coincides with Imbolc closely, the Celtic festival, which I think Imbolc is a cross-quarter day. I think I've got the jargon right. I think the quarter days are like the solstices and the equinoxes, and then you've got the cross-quarter days, which are halfway between the two. But it's not exact. But with astrology, one can create an exact point, the exact point where the Sun moves on to 0 degrees Aquarius. So it can be a point of power, and it's 45 degrees from the Aries point. So it is about the world around us. It is the world point, and the Sun is actually making a semi-square not just to the Aries point, but it's making a semi-square to Venus, because Venus is moving towards that Aries point. And so the issue about how we get on with people is important, and also people's unpleasantness. Because have a look at true Black Moon Lilith. True Black Moon Lilith is at 2951 Virgo. So don't forget true Black Moon Lilith hovering around the Aries point, the Sun making a sesquiquadrate to true Black Moon Lilith. And that might mean when we look around us at what's happening on this planet, we might see a lot of unpleasantness, true Black Moon Lilith, things from the past deciding to make their presence felt, sort of things coming out of the shadows. But I think I'll be talking a little bit about true Black Moon Lilith later in the video, when I look in detail at this, the Sun moving onto this point, 0 degrees Aquarius. And this is the chart for New York at noon. Just quickly looking at the chart for Sydney, Australia at noon. So Sydney, Australia at noon, the moon is earlier in Aries. The moon is at 14 degrees Aries, and it's sort of making a sextile to the Sun. Now, that sun-moon sextile is exact at noon in Australia and New Zealand, approximately. And so it may well be that if you're in Australia and New Zealand, today could be easier. Sort of, there might be sort of more harmony, more togetherness, sort of more balance than if, say, for example, you're in the Americas. In the Americas, I think there's more tension, more aggravation, and so overall, yeah, if you're in Australasia, possibly an easier day than if you're in the Americas. And then there is the heliocentric picture. So here is the position of the planets from the viewpoint of the Sun. And when we look at a geocentric chart, we focus quite a lot on the moon because the moon moves quickly. I mean, it moves through all the signs in a month. Now, with a heliocentric chart, there's absolutely no point in looking at the moon because the Sun is at the center of the solar system, and so the Earth and the moon are always going to be pretty much in exactly the same place from the Sun's perspective. So what we often, or at least what I have been looking at, more than usual, is Mercury. So Mercury, in some respects, is the equivalent of the moon in a heliocentric chart, not because of its meaning, but because of its speed. It's the active element. Mercury takes 88 days to move around the Sun, so does move quickly, and so that's probably why when you look at my heliocentric views each day, I do focus perhaps quite a lot on Mercury because there's more action involving Mercury, and the aspect we have at the moment geocentrically is a conjunction between Mercury and Pluto. And you can see that Mercury and Pluto are very close to each other. I mean, they're pretty close to each other geocentrically, but that geocentric Mercury-Pluto conjunction is starting to is not really very particularly exact at the moment. And in fact, it's not at all exact, is it? I mean, I think it's almost Mercury and Pluto geocentrically are almost half a sign away, but not heliocentrically. Heliocentrically, you can see Mercury is making a conjunction to Pluto, and it's starting to make an opposition to Mars. And so over the next couple of days, that Mercury conjunct Pluto it's quite intense, and it's a bit angry. Mercury opposition Pluto. It's got things to say, and it's an aspect which is about influence and who influences who and who is in control. And this is what Mercury is doing. It wants to perhaps transmit Pluto's message, and it's bringing together the Mars-Pluto opposition, because heliocentrically there is a Mars-Pluto opposition, and it's been picked up by Mercury. And so it's about the issues of power, and we're seeing issues of power come up a great deal. Governments are trying to remain in control. You've got the government in the UK, struggling with collapsing poll ratings. You've got Germany. You've got the elections coming up, and I see that the AfD are doing pretty well in opinion polls. And so there's sort of worry here, and so governments are perhaps feeling that they're losing control of the populations that they rule. And Mercury conjunct Pluto is, particularly when it's opposition Mars, is governments trying to retain control or even get control back. So it does tempt those in power perhaps to exceed their authority. So that's the main thing in the heliocentric chart, and what I want to do now is just look at things from a perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, February the 3rd, 2025. Aries. Aries, the moon is moving through your sign, and this is a time, Aries, when you really feel that you can assert yourself, be yourself, and you don't have to excuse your actions or apologize. And you may feel that you really have to go all the way. And especially as the moon is square Mars. So that moon square Mars is somewhat angry, and I'm not saying you're going to have an angry day, but the symbolism is angry, and you may feel that you have to defend your corner and make it clear that you want to get your way. And you can do it, but you've got to think about the kind of impression you're giving. You don't have to get angry just for the sake of it. You have to ask, what is worth getting angry about? Well, Aries, you might have your boundaries, you might have your limits. Mars in Cancer says something about you. Mars in Cancer retrograde, you have your space. There are things you regard as being important. If anyone crosses that line, whatever that line is, then you're going to react. So that's a possibility. But you don't want to just react for the sake of it. And maybe, Aries, you have to think in terms of escalation. Escalation, it's a ladder. Escalation is. There's this book, what was it? I think it was called it was on nuclear war, and it had an escalation ladder, and how nuclear wars start, and it starts with you have diplomatic problems and people, you might withdraw your ambassador, and then it goes all the way to the top of the ladder, which is when you're firing thermonuclear weapons at each other's cities. So it's a ladder, and so perhaps you have to think about the escalation ladder here. And this is especially on a verbal sense, because at the moment there is something quite verbal about you, and you are verbally quite fluent. And so if you're annoyed, you can show your annoyance in the most small ways. Little hints. You may not even have to say anything. Just a bit of body language could be all it takes. But then, if your message doesn't hit home, then you have to escalate a bit. Then you have to say something. But you don't necessarily have to go all the way. You don't necessarily have to fire thermonuclear weapons at the other person. Just take things as far as you need to, and don't go any further. And also, Aries, don't underestimate your verbal abilities. You will have a way with words today, and you'll be able to get the message right in most cases. And you're going to be helped by the fact that Mercury is making a trine to Jupiter. And this Mercury trine Jupiter really should work in your favor. It does allow you to talk freely, tell people what bothers you, talk about your ideas, and I think in most cases people are going to listen to you. And if you're worried that the moon is going to leave Aries, in fact the moon does leave Aries this evening if you're in the Americas. When does it leave Aries? I think it's at around 10:30 tonight if you're in on the east coast of America. That would be sort of around 7:30, 7:33. If you're on the west coast in California, for example, the moon does leave Aries, and you might say, well, what about the fire? You lost the fire, but Venus is coming to the rescue. Venus is on the verge of moving into Aries, and so when Venus moves into Aries, you get that blast of fire, and that's something I can talk about. I'll probably be talking about tomorrow. And as far as relationships are concerned, you could imagine that relationships have a potential for going badly, but the potential. Now, the reason they have the potential for going badly is because of the way you express yourself. There is something a little bit tense about you, and you could express your annoyance too quickly. On the other hand, if you make the effort, and I think you can make the effort, with Venus, the relationship planet, ruler of your 7th house, being quintile Jupiter, you make a special effort to be nice, and especially with Venus moving on to the Aries point. If you make that special effort, without giving anything away, of course, you've always got to look after yourself, but if you make that effort, it might seem a little bit fake, but if you try to be nice, without compromising your integrity, I do think, Aries, that you can be rewarded. Taurus. Taurus, if you're in the Americas, the moon actually goes into your sign this evening. Might be quite late this evening if you're on the East Coast in New York or Florida, for example. That would be, 10:33 p.m. But if you're in California, that would be 7:33 p.m. So I don't know what you're doing this evening, but this evening, if there are sort of opportunities come up, opportunities to do something different, perhaps go somewhere maybe, with moon moving into Taurus, you might actually find that things unexpectedly work out quite well for you. But for most of the day, the moon is in Aries. And if you're outside the Americas, all day, the moon is going to be in Aries. And, that does mean, with the moon in Aries, that you might feel that you perhaps should be holding something back, but you're just not ready to fire on all cylinders. And, that's okay. You don't have to, put your all into everything today. Even, you might think, oh, it's a Monday, new week, got to sort things out. But that's not necessarily the case. Though on a social level, we have a quintile between Venus and Jupiter. I mean, I say social level because that is certainly one manifestation. Venus represents you. It's quintile Jupiter, making a 72-degree aspect to Jupiter. Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics. They're fortunate planets. And with Venus quintile Jupiter, you can make people happy. You can make yourself happy. So if you are with people, you can sort of brighten things up and you can look at things in the absolute best possible light. So that is one way in which you can use that Venus quintile Jupiter. But Venus quintile Jupiter, you don't have to see it in a social sense. You could just say, well, Venus is you, it's quintile Jupiter, Jupiter's a planet of good fortune, you can be fortunate. Simple as that. So would you like to have a fortunate day? It seems that you can have a fortunate day, but it is a quintile. Quintile is a somewhat human-made aspect, and it might then be the case, Taurus, that you have to create your own luck. So if things aren't immediately going your way, then perhaps you can make them go your way. And how do you make things go your way? Well, it starts off in the mind. It starts off with you having a view about the way things could be. You have this view and you make it real and you work towards making it real. So if you feel today that things aren't working your way, that you feel frustrated, consider the possibility that it is a state of mind. Now, as you know, if you've watched these videos, I'm not someone who's into positive thinking. I'm not into affirmations. I'm not into that kind of stuff. I don't really believe in positive thinking. That's not me, really. On the other hand, I have to contradict myself and say, actually, there might be a place for positive thinking, Taurus, for you. And if you can think positively, in this case, with Venus quintile Jupiter, you may be able to change things very much in your favor. And consider your energy. I mean, although the moon is in Aries and you don't entirely feel that it's the right time to be pushing yourself, there are places in your life where you can push yourself, where you can really exercise maximum energy, maximum force. And it's got to be focused force, of course. And that doesn't mean that anyone has to know what you're doing. But if you find the right places to throw your energy, to really put your energy into, then you might be very pleased with the results. Though don't be undisciplined. You do need a certain discipline. That is important because if you've just got energy, what do you do with it? You need to focus on. You really need to focus it, because if you don't focus it, it could just get completely out of control. But I don't want to take away from the fact, Taurus, that it can be a very good day, and it starts with yourself and your perceptions. And I think it is a case where positive thinking can make a big difference. Gemini. Mercury is trine Jupiter. This is a very good aspect, especially because Mercury and Jupiter are both in air signs. So Mercury is in Aquarius. Jupiter's in Gemini. Jupiter's in your sign, and that means that you're luckier than average. Things can move your way, and so it's a shame, by the way, that you can't see out of my window because it's snowing now. It's just started to snow. There hasn't been much snow this year. In fact, I haven't seen any snow, but here, Pacific Northwest, yeah, it is snowing. I thought I'd just mention that, by the way, Gemini. Anyway, aside from the snow, it's a great day. And I think the snow is a good sign. I mean, at least that's how I feel about it. I feel positive about the snow. It sort of links with one's childhood, doesn't it? As a child, one sees the snow and one gets excited about it. And the children tell each other, you shouldn't look too hard at the snow because then you might jinx it, the snow might stop. But it is snowing. And Mercury is trine Jupiter. And it is a fortunate aspect. And it gives you opportunity. And don't think about it too much. Just think about what is actually possible, because today a lot of things could be possible, and don't be too cynical. There's always a danger that Geminis can be cynical, that they might see an opportunity, but they might think, it's just a waste of time, it's going nowhere. Mercury is in Aquarius. Mercury is in Aquarius is asking you to think above the situation, to not just focus on little details, but just focus on the broad picture, and perhaps to think about the divine, the supernatural. Sometimes Geminis can be tempted to think the supernatural out of existence, and to think, it's not there, is it? Overanalyze it. Don't overanalyze it. It may well be with this Mercury trine Jupiter that there is something, if not protecting you, at least communicating with you, or you might be in contact with some broader collective energy, which is informing your actions and giving you an idea about what actually is possible. So don't doubt yourself. Don't doubt what can happen. And also, don't get angry about things. There is a square between Moon and Mars. That is true today. And that Moon-Mars square might be about getting annoyed with people, perhaps friends, associates, saying things you don't like, or you saying things to them they don't approve of. And that could be Mercury trine Jupiter getting out of hand. Think about what you're saying, because you do have a lot to say with Mercury trine Jupiter. And if Mercury Jupiter has a negative side, it would perhaps be saying, one word too much. Now, Mercury trine Jupiter might also be connected with relationships. That makes perfect sense. Mercury is your ruler. Jupiter rules Sagittarius, your opposite sign. Therefore, these two planets, Mercury and Jupiter, are in trine aspect. So that suggests that you and another person have really a smooth flow of communication. Okay, primarily on a verbal level, but there could also be an emotional side to it. And so it's a time to get on with people. Ignore the fact that there's a moon square Mars. I don't think that moon square Mars is useful. And if you're in Australia and New Zealand, you can actually take advantage of a moon trine Sun. Okay, I think that in other places you could still be able to take advantage of it, but I think that probably in if you're a Gemini in Australia, New Zealand, you really are able to maximize the possibilities of finding harmony. You don't have to try so hard to restrain yourself, because I think you are more harmonious in that part of the world. But it doesn't matter where you are. You can get on with people, and relationships of all kinds can prosper under the beneficent influence of Mercury, and Mercury making this trine to Jupiter. And if you're working today, Mercury trine Jupiter should also work in your favor. It does allow you to get on with people, to do a good job, to show off your talents. Mercury trine Jupiter, and you can really demonstrate your abilities, and you should really take every opportunity to demonstrate what you can do. So overall, Gemini, it looks like being a really good day. I think 5 stars out of 5. Cancer. Cancer, you probably feel a certain amount of responsibility today. You might not want this responsibility, but I think that you still have to accept it. Some people do need leadership. I mean, they need to be shown leadership. And Cancer, today, this is something that you can do. The moon is in Aries. It's square Mars. Now, moon square Mars as an aspect is often regarded as being somewhat difficult. I mean, it's seen as being angry, perhaps opinionated, doesn't want to be contradicted. But in your case, this moon square Mars looks as if it should work quite well. And even if it's not exactly in squares, if you're in Australia, for example, the moon and Mars will be a long way from being in square. But still, we have got moon in Aries and Mars in Cancer. Mars in your sign, moon in Aries, which is a sign connected with the outside world, with where you're moving towards, your goals, your ambitions. So that moon square Mars really does make you very focused on what you want to do, and not really tolerating delays and distractions and contradictions. And in most cases, you'll probably give the impression that you won't take kindly to opposition. And because of that, most people are just going to feel it sort of intuitively, and they're not going to contradict you. They're going to keep out of your way. And as a result of that moon square Mars, you can cover a lot of ground. And if something does annoy you, something does make you angry, I think in most cases you will be able to express that anger in a reasonably constructive way, though it's true that a few Cancerians can have anger issues. It can happen. And when Cancerians get angry, they can get really angry. And so Cancer, do think about how much you want to express your annoyance. You probably don't have to go all the way, but do ask yourself, what is the right level, because you don't want to go all the way. And it's not just that the moon isn't just square Mars. Moon actually is making a conjunction to Chiron, and the moon conjunct Chiron in some respects is about your ambitions, but it's also about your ambitions perhaps to do things differently. Today, you don't want to follow the crowd, and you want to do things slightly differently because you feel that's the right way. And as far as you're concerned, if you just do things in the standard way, if you just if you follow the crowd, you're not going to get anywhere. At least that's from your perspective. And it may be a time when you have to quite militantly express your views. In fact, I should have said this earlier, Mars is square Chiron. And so with Mars in Cancer, square Chiron in Aries, that is actually quite a dramatic aspect. And that might actually be about you feeling that you really do have to do things your way. And you have to do things differently your way. And perhaps your uniqueness is becoming very clear, especially if you feel there's some moral obligation. Perhaps you become aware that someone's doing something which is immoral, or doing something that someone else might get hurt, and you're very aware of the wounds around you, the wounds in society, the wounds that other people have to bear, and that, as a result, that might make you want to stand up for people, and also perhaps stand up for yourself. So, Cancer, you're not someone to tangle with at the moment, but try not to cause too much disruption. You can be a peacemaker, because Venus is starting to move into Aries. Venus isn't quite there yet, but I think it's tomorrow Venus moves into Aries. So Venus moving into Aries, that's a very high-profile place for Venus to be in, that may make you a little bit more considerate and also self-aware. I think with Venus moving into Aries, you're going to become aware of the kind of impression you're giving. It may be quite image-related, but Venus in Aries, I'll be discussing that when I look at your horoscope for tomorrow. Leo. The Sun is at 15 degrees Aquarius, and you might be thinking, well, so what? 15 degrees Aquarius is a very special degree because it is halfway between 0 degrees Capricorn and 0 degrees Aries. It is making a 45-degree aspect to the Aries point, 45-degree aspect to the solstice point, and with the Sun at this solstice point, it's a time when you are very connected with the world. At least you're striving for a connection with the world, and at the same time you're also aware of how you might be disconnected. You can see how what's happening out there and what's happening in your life may be different, maybe may clash with each other, and that lack of a connect. I mean, I've just said you're very connected with the world, but there's a lack of connect at the same time, and that might sound completely contradictory. You're connected almost with the disconnections, and the question then is what do you do about it? Well, I think one thing to do is to just be aware of it. I mean, if all of us felt completely comfortable with our connections with the world, then we thought that everything was fine, then in a way it would be useless, wouldn't it? We would just go for this sort of mindless complacency, and we don't want mindless complacency. It's that feeling of being a little bit of a misfit, of being a bit disconnected, that in many cases can inspire us to action. And you can see this reflected maybe in the people you meet. These people you meet, they are representatives of the world out there, and if you feel that you and someone else aren't getting on with each other, it's not just about one relationship. It is about your relationship with the whole. And one thing you can do is try to give yourself a little bit of distance. That has been a theme over the last couple of days, I hope. Giving yourself some distance, giving yourself some perspective, and resisting the temptation to get annoyed just for the sake of it. There are some things you can't do, and so there's no point in getting upset about it. You can't change the world. You certainly can't change the world overnight, but still, there are things which are certainly annoying, and you have to work out perhaps the best way of dealing with them. Now, one aspect we do have today, which I think is a pretty fortunate aspect, is Mercury trine Jupiter. Mercury is moving through Aquarius, your opposite sign. It's trine Jupiter. This Mercury trine Jupiter, from a social perspective, strikes me as being very fortunate. It does allow you to get on with people, even if you don't always feel entirely connected with them. And so in that sense, Leo, try to be open-minded and try to talk things through. And that, I think, is something you can do. And also, don't block people out. And that is going to be a theme over the week, because what's happening over the week is that Mercury is moving closer and closer to the Sun. And the Sun is your ruler. And so as Mercury gets closer to the Sun, it starts to feel burnt up. And Mercury might represent another person who has perhaps a different opinion from you. And you might want to listen. You might not want to listen to them. Or maybe someone is trying to say something to you. They're trying to communicate. And you're just not noticing, or you're ignoring them, or you're discounting them. And so, that would be a shame. And also, don't think that you've got all the answers with that Sun conjunct Mercury coming up. Mercury represents extra information. Information that really you could benefit from, but you might just think you know best. And so over the next week, over the course of this week, really make a special effort to open your eyes. If any new information comes your way, then at least make the effort to try to understand it, try to read what's in front of you. I mean, it might not seem to make much sense, but if you make the effort, you might be pleasantly surprised. And if you also, do talk as much as possible and try to talk things through. And certainly, Leo, don't think you've got all the answers. And if you have an approach of humility, you don't have to, wear sackcloth and ashes. It's nothing like that. But if you have a certain amount of humility, I think that you will definitely benefit. Virgo. Mercury is trine Jupiter. Mercury trine Jupiter is the most important aspect today, I would have said, especially for a Virgo, because Mercury is your ruler. And so if Mercury is trine Jupiter, then that is fortunate. Things can really work very well for you. It's not necessarily going to be spectacular, this Mercury trine Jupiter. It's not like wonderful things are just going to appear from nowhere with Mercury trine Jupiter. Jupiter doesn't like to be treated like that. If you see an aspect involving Jupiter and you think that you're going to get showered with gold, or you're going to get wonderful things are going to be delivered to you on a silver plate, it's just not going to happen. On the other hand, with Mercury trine Jupiter, if you work with it, then you are very likely to be rewarded. And Mercury in Aquarius is encouraging you, I believe, to be quite studious and industrious and do what is necessary. It's certainly not a time for being lazy. And lazy, not just in terms of hard work. When one thinks lazy, you've got to really push it and work 14 hours a day. It's not just about that. It's about intellectual laziness. That really should be avoided. You do have to have an open mind, and don't think that you've got You've got everything sorted out, therefore you don't need to consider anything else. You always have to consider something else. And you need to just make sure that you keep studying, keep reading, keep taking on board new pieces of information. And in that way, it will all start to work with this Mercury trine Jupiter. And it might be working in terms of your own private projects, or if you've got a career or you're going into work, that Mercury trine Jupiter should be very useful. In fact, yeah, Virgos who have a job, who are going into a job, or perhaps who are looking for a job, would I think be able to greatly benefit from this Mercury trine Jupiter. But it's not necessarily spectacular. It's just you doing what's expected of you, and perhaps going above and beyond. And if you can do that, it might be a little bit painful, it might be, hard work, and you're wondering what is the point. But if you keep working away, Virgo, then I think that things will start to move for you. And it's not just about having a career or job, it's just whatever you're working on. Don't be put off by feelings of temporary boredom. Just keep going, and the rewards should pretty soon start to make themselves felt. The Mercury trine Jupiter can also be useful as far as relationships are concerned. The various relationships in your life should work pretty well. Again, not necessarily spectacularly, but there's just open lines of communication. If it's something you want to say, now's the time to say it. So it might be, for example, Virgo, that you haven't said something and that's made you nervous, and you've been concerned about this, and maybe with this Mercury trine Jupiter, it is the time to say something. Okay, maybe not today. If you don't feel like it today, maybe you want to wait until tomorrow. I mean, tomorrow the moon is in Taurus. In fact, late this evening, if you're in the Americas, the moon is in Taurus. So perhaps you want to wait until the moon is in Taurus, but over today or tomorrow would be a great time, Virgo, for telling someone what's on your mind. You'll be able to use the right words, even if it's quite a difficult issue. I think that you'll be able to sort of really express it well. And heliocentrically, I don't know if you remember the heliocentric chart. I don't know whether you're looking at the section of this video where I looked at the heliocentric picture. There is a conjunction between Mercury and Pluto, and that Mercury-Pluto conjunction is quite powerful, and it is about the strength of your personality and the strength of your message, and feeling that at some level there is a message that you need to transmit. And you might feel that you don't want to transmit it because it's Mercury conjunct Pluto. It might be quite heavy. You're not quite sure what the response is going to be. But I wouldn't worry about it. If you are open and honest, I think you will be appreciated. And even if you're mentioning something quite difficult, I think it will be okay. Especially as today, the broad area of relationships and getting on with people, making the right contacts, that all does seem to be working in your favor. Libra. Venus needs to be watched, the planet Venus, because it is on the verge of changing sign. And Venus changes sign, moves into Aries tomorrow. And we can talk more about Venus in Aries tomorrow. I mean, it's a bit of a mixed blessing, but regardless of what that means for Venus to be in Pisces or Venus to be in Aries, it does indicate some kind of a changeover. And at the moment, as Venus crosses from Pisces to Aries, you may feel that you're neither one place nor the other, and there might be a certain sense of confusion. And rather than fight against this confusion, just accept it. So don't feel that you have to do anything, that you have to necessarily commit yourself to anything. It really is not necessary, and just perhaps you don't have all the information you need. And tomorrow, the day after, I mean, when does Venus move into Aries, to be precise? So, yeah, it moves into Aries on, well, tomorrow, Tuesday, London time, 7:57 a.m. So if you're in California, Venus actually moves into Aries today, 3 minutes to midnight. So it's happening, Venus moving into Aries. And I do think that that is going to have an important impact on you. And I'll be looking at Venus in Aries, I think, in detail when in tomorrow's video. But, aside from Venus moving into Aries, we do have a trine aspect between Mercury and Jupiter. That this trine aspect is exact, and it's a fortunate aspect. It's about good communications. It's about good thoughts. Our thought processes are working well. And in the Libran horoscope, that Mercury-Jupiter is especially important because, you've got Mercury in Aquarius, air sign, Jupiter in Gemini, an air sign, and then you've got Libra. And so Mercury and Jupiter are both making a trine to Libra. And so you might just feel a sense of positivity. And it is quite a positive day for many people. I'm someone who is not always particularly positive. I mean, sometimes I think I'm giving you bad news horoscopes. I don't want to give bad news horoscopes, but maybe I should call them bad news horoscopes. I'm not giving bad news. I'm not into giving bad news. I'm just trying to be realistic. On the other hand, this Mercury trine Jupiter just helps things move, and it does allow you to think about possibilities, your own possibilities. It's so easy to think about other people's possibilities. People want you to be excited about what they're going to do. What about you? And what about you want to do? What about what you want to do? And it is a time to be thinking about what you want to do, not what other people want to do. And it's nothing trivial. It's not like saying, I want to go to this particular restaurant. I don't want to go to this particular restaurant. I don't want to spend money. I do want to spend money, whatever. It's more about what you want to do on an existential level. What is important to you? That's what it's all about with the Sun and Mercury in Aquarius, and now with Mercury trine Jupiter. You need to take things to the next level. It's about taking yourself to the next level, and hopefully thinking that you're aligning yourself with something which is almost immortal, which goes beyond your everyday existence. Because Mercury trine Jupiter, Jupiter, in some respects, is God. I think the Greek in Greek, Jupiter is, if you look at Ptolemy, always Jupiter is translated as Dios, I think, and Dios, I think, is the Greek for God. So there is a godlike nature to Jupiter, and so Mercury trine Jupiter, there is the potential here for the connection with the divine, and then to think, what is God's work? What is God's work? Well, God's work is what you've been put on the planet for, and this is maybe what you need to think about. So you can't just trivialize things and do things other people's way. It's not that you're being selfish to do things your way. It's actually about being respectful to yourself and to what you've been given. But maybe I'm just being a little bit over dramatic here. And it is a time of transition, Libra, but in spite of that, just don't forget what's going on under the surface, and the fact that it is about you pursuing your destiny. And with the moon square Mars, not everyone is going to agree with you. Not everyone is going to be sympathetic, and there may be pressure to do something you don't necessarily want to do. But I think it's a day when you should probably be resisting this pressure. Scorpio. Scorpio, Moon is square Mars today. Okay, it might be tomorrow. It depends where you are. But certainly if you are in the Americas, the Moon is very much square Mars. And Moon square Mars can be a difficult aspect. We've got Moon in Aries, Mars in Cancer, and it can stir you up. It can make you irritated, especially if things aren't exactly going your way. You want things to go your way, and if things are done in a slightly different way, then Scorpio, you might get annoyed, and you might feel that you want to express this annoyance. But I think, Scorpio, you're not going to be very good at expressing your annoyance. It will come over as being somewhat clumsy. So, Scorpio, I would kind of suggest that you try to be tolerant and patient, and you don't just fire off just because something isn't going your way or something isn't being done right. Yeah, being done right. Yeah, you want things to be done right, but that's not an expectation that can always be accomplished. And you might be setting high standards not just for other people, but also for yourself. And so that Moon square Mars might be about self-annoyance. So that is a possibility. Though Moon square Mars is a fairly short-lived aspect. I mean, okay, we've got the Moon in Aries, Mars in Cancer, so there is a kind of a square relationship between Moon and Mars, regardless of their precise angular relationship. I do think that Moon-Mars square is probably going to be a bit stronger if you're in the Americas than if you're in other parts of the world, but I wouldn't get completely hung up on it. And at the same time, Scorpio, try to value what you have. Try to be appreciative of what you can do well, and don't feel that it has to be done absolutely perfectly. I mean, I think that there is a perfectionist streak in you at the moment, but I wouldn't get too caught up in it. And maybe you have to just think about where you are at this particular stage, and there may be a feeling that there is a little bit of a learning process here, that there are things you have to still sort of work out, and I think that you can actually work them out very well, provided you don't beat yourself up about it and don't worry too much if you make mistakes. And turning to relationships could go well, they could go badly, and there is a certain element of choice here. With that Moon square Mars, you might be difficult. You might take exception to things. And so you may not always be a particularly good person to have around, especially if you haven't got much self-awareness. But then most Scorpios are very self-aware, and because of this self-awareness, you can start to have insights into what other people are trying to do. And I think that is the key point. It's not what people are doing, are achieving. It's what they're attempting to achieve. And their attempts may be taking place, not just in terms of what they're doing externally, but also what's going on in their minds. I think that people are trying very hard, and sometimes one doesn't think that anyone is trying. It's only ourselves doing the trying, but actually people are trying, and that might be connected with the fact that there's a quintile between Venus and Jupiter. So with that quintile to Venus and Jupiter, you've got people really trying their hardest to be positive, to make things look good, and their first efforts may not be perfect, but you need to accept that people are trying and really give people a chance. And don't expect anyone to be absolutely crystal clear at the moment, because Venus is changing sign. Venus is moving from Pisces to Aries, so a lot of people are in a period of transition, and I think you just need to accept that. And as you are tolerant of your own faults, hopefully you should also be tolerant of other people's faults, and also recognize that if people are making mistakes, in most cases they are trying, and if they're given a chance, they can get better and better at things. And so it's important, Scorpio, not to be too much of a perfectionist. Sagittarius. Mercury is making a trine to Jupiter. This is a fortunate aspect. Jupiter is your ruler. It's trine Mercury. With Mercury trine Jupiter, you're able to be yourself. You're able to say what's on your mind. And there's just quite a lot of movement. And if you're looking for variety, I think that is something that you can definitely find. And you certainly shouldn't be underestimating other people. Other people with Mercury trine Jupiter have got a huge amount to offer if you just give them a chance, and you maybe have to discover what they've got to offer. So Sagittarius, it would be a good time for communication, listening to people, talking to people, finding out what's on their mind, and the words will just flow. So if you have an in-depth conversation with someone, it can be very incredibly satisfying. It doesn't have to be an in-depth conversation, but it's just that if you only talk to someone for 15 seconds, then what can you achieve? But if you're prepared to talk to people for a prolonged period of time, there is scope here for really getting to understand them. And it's a day when you don't have to always be the one taking the initiative. Listen to what people have to offer. I mean, you can be aware of your own power. It's not that you're in a weak position. In fact, because you're in a strong position fundamentally, that means that you don't have to be so uptight. You can give people an opportunity to express themselves. You can see where they want to go, give them feedback, and there's no pressure here. And then goes without saying, Sagittarius, that today relationships of all kinds should really be working very well. I mean, all things being equal, I'm always wary about talking about relationships in astrology, particularly if one's talking about, stuff like romance. That's a real nightmare astrologically. It does bother me. I know that people are really obsessed about astrology and romance. People write books about astrology and love signs and all this kind of stuff. But I'm actually of the view that in many cases, romantic relationships and astrology should not really have much connection with each other. I'm just not convinced astrology is helpful. I'm very always wary of giving false hope in this direction. But with Mercury trine Jupiter, relationships, whatever relationship you're looking for, it's as good as it gets, Mercury trine Jupiter. I mean, because Mercury is ruler of Gemini, your opposite sign, and so if Mercury is trine Jupiter, then logically relationships should work very well. Even there's a possibility of new relationships. Again, all things being equal. But if you think about something with relationships, if you really look for something, it's the kind of thing, if you look too hard for it, you never get it. And so that's one of the reasons I'm thinking that astrology and romance are these two areas that actually I don't think should be connected with each other, and it is a real issue, and it's actually an ethical issue as well. We also have the moon in Aries, moon in a fire sign, and so with moon in Aries, it's a fun place of a moon to be if you're a Sagittarian. And it's particularly fun if you're in Australia and New Zealand, because the moon is in Aries, sextile the sun. So if you're in Australia or New Zealand, it should be, you know, a fun day where there's a certain harmony there. Relationships work particularly well in Australia and New Zealand because of that moon sextile sun is exact. If you're in the Americas, that moon sextile sun is not as exact. In fact, you're starting to feel the impact of moon square Mars, and so moon square Mars might be about how you relate to other people. There is smooth communication potentially, but moon square Mars is a little bit too emotional. It sort of injects emotion into things where it might not be appropriate. And so with moon square Mars, if possible, try to forget that Mars. Try not to engage with that Mars. That Mars wants to cause trouble, and it wants to disrupt the flow. Whereas moon in Aries on its own, it is about flow, and things can happen nicely. But just don't rise to the bait. Don't get annoyed by things. And fundamentally, Sagittarius, the most important aspect today is Mercury trine Jupiter. It is a fortunate aspect. It allows you to have great communications, and it allows you to say what's on your mind and just do it in a way that is very harmonious. And with that moon square Mars, just try to forget it. Yeah, there might be things happening which could make you angry. You might feel that you have to make a desperate effort to assert yourself. But I think, Sagittarius, it's a situation where you should somehow try to resist that temptation. Capricorn, the moon continues moving through Aries, and with the moon moving through Aries, it's another day when you do want to make sure that you are properly grounded, and you're going to want to make sure that you can do everything in a way that doesn't cause too much disruption. And there might well be a bit of disruption, especially if you're in the Americas, because the moon in Aries is making a square to Mars, and with that moon square Mars, it just might be that some people might be irritating. They just might feel as if they are on a different wavelength than you. And once you start getting irritated, it may be difficult to stop. And so the best thing, Capricorn, is to just put yourself into a situation where there aren't irritations. And if something doesn't feel right, then maybe it's just not right. There is an alternative way of looking at it, and we could say, well, okay, moon might be square Mars, so that might be one thing Mars is doing. But also, a Chiron is square Mars, and Chiron square Mars might be actually about a challenge. You've been doing things in a particular way, and you've become comfortable doing things in a particular way. And with Mars square Chiron, there may be events taking place, or maybe things people say, which suddenly make you think, was this the right approach? Are you actually doing things right? And it might actually occur to you that maybe you have been too cautious. Perhaps you haven't told people how you feel. Perhaps you should have been doing more to rock the boat. Sometimes a boat does have to be rocked. And with Chiron in Aries, Chiron, if you take Chiron as a maverick and you take Aries as the most private point in your chart, Aries, it's right at the bottom of the Capricorn chart. So if you take Chiron like that, you could say that sense of stability needs to be shifted a bit, and you have to do things which don't just change yourself, but change other people. So perhaps people have just got too complacent. Perhaps you have got too complacent. It's no good just accepting, just thinking everything's going to be fine. Sometimes you've got to say, no, it's not fine. And that's perhaps where Chiron square Mars comes in. It's the challenge. Maybe it's what someone says, what someone points out to you, and you just realize that you just can't go on as before. It wouldn't be right. You maybe just have to make a fuss, and maybe you actually have to get attention. You don't really want attention at the moment, but sometimes that might be something you have to insist on. Now, sorry to be a little bit negative. I do need to give a bit of balance here, and Mercury is trine Jupiter, and that Mercury trine Jupiter, it's a great aspect. It's great for everyone, and Mercury is in Aquarius, and the sign Aquarius for you, Capricorn, has some relevance to what you own, what you possess, and Mercury trine Jupiter can be about financial benefit. I mean, very straightforward. It's not that Mercury trine Jupiter is necessarily a fantastically exciting aspect, but it's a useful aspect. I mean, Mercury trine Jupiter, it could be a fantastically exciting aspect in a different situation. But I think for you, Capricorn, it's just plain useful. And it's about being fortunate, but in an undramatic way. And with Mercury trine Jupiter, if you put your effort into money and you put your effort into money, into trying to make the most of what you have. Perhaps if there's an opportunity to make some more money, opportunity to get your hands on some money, something you really want to, you feel you really want to get hold of it, then that Mercury trine Jupiter could actually make things happen for you. So don't be pessimistic when it comes to money. I mean, don't be unrealistic. But with Mercury trine Jupiter, something can happen. It's probably connected with your own efforts, and you are able to put in the effort. It's a day, Capricorn. If you really want something, I'm actually very confident that you actually can get hold of it. Yeah, really, that really is possible, because you are really full of energy. The energy may be understated, may not be obvious, but deep down there is a lot of energy. And that energy, yeah, sure, it needs a focus. And one focus might be to use the power of that Mercury-Jupiter trine. So if there's something you want of a material, in a material way, I think you can do it, and you can put effort into making the preparations, and you can get it. And it may not be spectacular, but just one way or another, it just, whatever you're looking for, it does come your way. Aquarius. There is a trine between Mercury and Jupiter, and we've got Mercury in Aquarius, in your sign, plus we've got Jupiter in Gemini. So this Mercury trine Jupiter it's a pretty good aspect, and it does have a direct impact on your sign. So, with Mercury already in Aquarius, this is about communication. It's how you express yourself. It's also about the way you think. And so at the moment, you are very expressive, and I think that by and large, your intellectual capacities are on good form. And then we get this trine with Jupiter. And so this Mercury trine Jupiter allows you to really think positively about everything, or at least most things. Jupiter is very uplifting. Mercury is your state of mind. And so there are things to be happy and optimistic about. And that optimism quite possibly starts with you yourself. Don't think about what's happening outside around you first. Think about yourself first, because that's the beginning of everything. And so with Mercury trine Jupiter, you're able to really focus on who you are and what you can do. And because of your confidence, I think you are quite confident at the moment, because of your confidence, I think you're in a great position to be able to really make things happen. So if you want something to happen with this Mercury trine Jupiter, I'm confident that you can actually take action to really make waves. So Aquarius, don't doubt yourself, and don't doubt your abilities. If you believe there's any possibility that you can do something, then I think there's an excellent chance that you really, really can. Of course, I'm not advocating you to take risks. Don't think that you can climb a cliff just because you think you might be able to do it. You've got to be reasonable. But by and large, Mercury trine Jupiter kind of makes you not just optimistic, but it also makes you a somewhat larger than life person. Okay, not larger than life in a fiery way, but larger than life as soon as people start to talk to you, start to realize what kind of a person you are, and you start to share your ideas, and people think, yeah, that's great. They feel that they want to almost become part of your ideas, and it's certainly not a time to be doing things other people's way. It is about you, and it's about what you can do. If other people can be helpful, that would certainly be great, but you are at the center of things. And furthermore, Aquarius, you're able to bring to bear really a huge amount of power. You're very powerful at the moment, and it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, for anyone to get the better of you. Yeah, it is all about you. I mean, that is an important point to make. And at the same time, the sun, as we know, is in Aquarius. It's in the middle of Aquarius. It's actually right in the middle of Aquarius. It's at 15 degrees Aquarius. And that is an important point, 15 degrees Aquarius, because 15 degrees Aquarius is halfway between the solstice at the end of December and the equinox at the end of March. And it's also semi-square the Aries point. And so right now you are connected. You are connected with the world, and you're connected with what is happening in the world. And furthermore, the people close to you, they're also connected. And so there is a feeling of connection, that you understand what's happening. Now, this feeling of connection might be quite brief. There just might be a moment where you just understand things, when you and those close to you are just in tune with everything. And then things go out of focus. So what you have to do is kind of remember those insights you have as the sun moves to that point at 15 degrees Aquarius, right in the center of your sign, because it is a moment of power. And so I'm hoping you can take advantage of this moment of power. But I'll be talking more about what it means for the sun to be in Aquarius at the end. Sorry, not just the sun in Aquarius, so the sun to be at 15 degrees Aquarius in a few minutes' time after the I Ching. So that's something I'll be talking about in detail. I mean, it refers to everyone, but I think for you, Aquarius, it may have special relevance because it is the sun in your sign. Pisces. Venus is quintile Jupiter. And this 72-degree aspect between Venus and Jupiter does affect you, and I regard this as being an entirely positive aspect. It's an aspect that encourages you to make the most of everything, and Venus is quintile Jupiter, which is your ruler. So Venus might reflect other people. Venus could reflect money. It could reflect something to do with art. So, it depends on what you're interested in at the moment. Are you interested in art, relationships, money, maybe all three, 2 out of 3, whatever? And this quintile is indicating, Pisces, that there is a possibility here of you being able to do some work on yourself to begin with, because quintiles always start with the self. They start with what you are trying to make, and it starts with a thought, and everything flows from that thought. And so that thought might be something you want to bring into your life. It could be another person, it could be a sum of money, it could be some piece of art, or creating something beautiful. So there are a number of ways in which it can manifest. But the thought is about what you need to do to make it happen. And so with that Venus Jupiter, you can do it, but you have to be aware of the process. It starts with the thought. It starts with the mind. It's what you're doing in terms of your own private world, as thought turns into action, and then that action is brought out into the wider world, and that's when you get the results that you're looking for. So it's important that you're not at all negative today. I mean, it's a day when positive thinking works for everyone, I think, all 12 signs. So it's okay to be positive today. I mean, as you know, I'm not a great fan of positivity just for the sake of it. I think it can be a bit of a delusion. But if you get the process right, Pisces, then I think that you could be, very pleased with the results. And don't underestimate, Pisces. Just the plain power of your personality and your will. If you want something to happen, and you can actually picture it in your mind, then that is a good start. But just picturing something in your mind is perhaps not enough. But you do have to go through the process of starting to make it happen around you, and then going to the wider world. And that does put you in, I think, a very strong position. And another aspect we've got is Mercury trine Jupiter. So in a way, it's more of the same, but perhaps on a slightly different level. Mercury is about the mind. Mercury trine Jupiter suggests to me, Pisces, that actually your mind is currently on very good form, and you're able to think about things. Some of these things are quite private, but you're still able to think about things, work them out, and create plans. Though Mercury trine Jupiter, additionally, it is about relationships. Because, Jupiter's you. Mercury is ruler of Virgo, your opposite sign. So Mercury trine Jupiter is about working on relationships, the various people in your life, seeing what can be done. It starts probably on a verbal level, Mercury trine Jupiter, and then things can perhaps get deeper. I mean, relationships happen on many levels, and it is a time to be talking to people. I mean, you don't have to be flamboyant about it, but just a short conversation can lead to something else. And there will be something about you which, people are attracted to you, but you're easygoing. There is a moon square Mars today, and I have suggested that for some of the signs this moon square Mars could be a problem. I don't think it's going to affect you, this moon square Mars. And you are one of the more easygoing of the 12 signs, maybe the most easygoing. And because you're easygoing and you've got no axe to grind, I just think that that can give a big boost to your popularity ratings. And relationships today should, all things being equal, work pretty well. And now it's time to look at things from a viewpoint of the I Ching. And I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video. And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 5, which is waiting. Now, this is quite a complex I Ching reading, because it's not kind of what it seems. Now, waiting seems to be a good position to be in. The idea is that we are waiting, and we just have this inner confidence that things are just going to work out. But we needn't be in a hurry. We know it's going to happen. Just relax. No hurry there. And if you look at this hexagram, to my mind, it looks quite balanced to me. You've got bottom 3 lines are unbroken. Top 3 lines. Okay, you've got the abyss. The top 3 lines are the abyss. They represent sort of the water, but the abyss is supported by those unbroken 3 lines. So the hexagram has a certain stability to it, and so the idea is that we are waiting, and things are fine, and it's okay. But we've got a moving line, and fourth line moves, and the 4th line, what the I Ching says is, now don't panic here, but James Legge, one of the earlier translators of the I Ching into English, I think that was in the 19th century. It's quite a long time ago. He says, waiting in blood, or waiting in the place of blood. Now, that sounds pretty terrible. And the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching also talks about this, waiting in blood. It is not necessarily a dreadful situation, but an incredibly dangerous situation. And it's a situation, now don't panic, it has a happy ending, kind of, so don't worry about it. But it's a situation where we can't move forward because things are bad. We can't move back because we've gone too far. So we're kind of stuck. And so we're waiting now because we don't have a choice. We have to wait. We have to wait this thing out. And it just may be that we've got involved in something which is not going right. And this could be something trivial. I mean, it may be that you have decided you wanted to repair an electronic device, and you've taken the back off and you've got the wires all over the place, and you realize you haven't got a clue what you're doing. Now, it could be as simple as that. Something utterly mundane. Although, given the fact that the word blood comes up in this, just watch out for knives, cutting yourself, or, just be careful with knives. And, whatever you're doing in the kitchen or cutting wood, whatever you're doing with sharp edges or things where there is a possibility for breaking a skin or whatever. I think one has with the I Ching got to try to take this literally. There is a literal aspect to the I Ching that can sometimes manifest in quite a surprising way. So don't do anything dangerous, or where there's a possibility of broken skin or blood or anything like that. And so there is that waiting, or don't pick up sharp objects, I don't know. Just you know what I mean. It's just watch out for that kind of thing. But I'm probably I'm just showing an abundance of caution here. And chances are it's not like that, and it's just realizing one is in a bad situation and one can't do anything about it short term. And what we have to do is perhaps wait it out. Now, I quoted from James Legge in his translation of the I Ching. I started the quotation, so I will continue the quotation. He says, waiting in the place of blood, but he will get out of the cavern. So although the situation is difficult, it's not totally unfortunate. There is a way out. So don't feel that you're stuck. If you feel that you're stuck, there is going to be a way out. And because, the fourth line moves, and the fourth line, it moves to a hexagram number. That means it moves to hexagram 43, which is breakthrough. And Greg Winkup, in his translation of I Ching, he doesn't call this breakthrough. He calls it flight. It's about escape. And so with this hexagram, we have an opportunity to escape a difficult situation. One thing you can say about, one thing that can be mentioned is you hear the cries of the prisoners. You hear people being captured. You hear other people getting into a bad situation. And because you hear of this, you're warned. And so you can get out. So you have a chance to get out. So what this overall reading is about is a difficult situation, not a disastrous situation. It's a dangerous situation, but there is an escape route. And so don't panic. Don't rush immediately, because for a time you might be stuck, but then you will see your opportunity. Of course, you've got to take the opportunity. If you don't take that opportunity, then you might miss it. So if you see that chance to get out, then take it. And it's now time to look at two things. I firstly wanted to look at the 15 degrees Aquarius, when the sun is exactly at 15 degrees Aquarius. And so let's look at that chart. Now, that's why I've got the sun. I mean, it's not necessarily a particularly appropriate picture for that, when the sun is at 15 degrees Aquarius. It's a reminder that it is a solar event. It's halfway between the solstice in December and the equinox, which is going to take place the end of next month. And we're at that halfway point when the sun is at 15 degrees Aquarius. And so you can actually take the actual moment when that happens. So there is a precise moment when the sun is at 15 degrees Aquarius. And I just think that chart might have some relevance. And so New York time, it is at 10 minutes past 9 in the morning. So that means that London time, it's going to be 10 minutes past 4 in the morning. So really early in the morning in Europe. It's going to be, is that right? Sorry, no, I'm sorry, I've got it the wrong way around. Sorry, forget that. Let me start again. It's at 10 minutes past 9 New York time. That means that it's going to be at 10 minutes past 2 London time, 10 minutes past 3 Paris time, and it's going to be tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But there is a precise moment it happens, and it's not as powerful as a solstice or an equinox, but in a way it is. You could say it's the astrological Imbolc. I mean, I know the Imbolc festival, the Imbolc in the Celtic calendar, I think it's regarded as being the beginning of spring. It's the lambing season, and I think there's questions about what does Imbolc mean, what its etymology is. It's also one possibility it's connected with buds, and I suppose this time of year you can see the first buds, you can see the first signs of life, even if it is snowing. And so that's perhaps what this festival is about. But astrologically, I would be inclined to say, well, okay, Imbolc is Imbolc, 1st of February is special, but astrologically that cross-quarter day, from an astrological cross-quarter day is that point where the sun is exactly 15 degrees Aquarius. And so this is a moment where the cosmos opens, perhaps not as strongly as an equinox or a solstice, but there may be some feel to this. And so that Mercury trine Jupiter that I've been talking about has added poignancy because it happens at the time when the sun is at 15 degrees Aquarius, when it's 45 degrees from the solstice point, 45 degrees from the Aries point. And so that does give a sense of power, and that Mercury trine Jupiter is given special significance, and it is a time when we need to think about our thoughts and the way we communicate, and I think that we're going to be able to communicate with great power, and the things we say are going to be especially significant, and it might be a good day for relationships, at least in a verbal sense, getting on with people, starting something. So conversation really, could matter. So I'm not going to give this chart the same kind of emphasis that I give to a solstice or an equinox, but I just wanted to point it out. And when I have these kind of charts, I often sort of like to relocate them. I just want to relocate this chart to two locations which are very close to one another. And one location is London. So if we locate this precise moment when the sun is at 15 degrees Aquarius to London, we have Saturn on the midheaven, and we have Mars on the ascendant. And if we relocate it to Paris, because London and Paris are pretty close, Saturn is exactly on the midheaven, and Mars is fairly close to the ascendant as well. So those two places, London and Paris, those two capitals, which are relatively close to one another. Although France and the UK are traditional rivals and they don't often get on with each other, in some ways those two countries are going through similar experiences, and perhaps they've got more common ground than they realise. There was a plan in the 1950s, I think it was the 1950s or just after the Second World War, for Britain and France to actually unite. I mean, it's kind of a strange idea, but there was actually a plan after the Second World War. So what this might mean with Saturn on the midheaven, Mars on the ascendant, it's just more of the same. These two countries are going through hell, basically. I don't know which country is going through more hell than the other. So I get more news about Britain. So Britain seems to be a bit of a disaster area, and I think that this sun on the 15 degrees Aquarius is just going to emphasize it. So certainly here's the UK chart. I mean, it's not so different from the Paris chart, but Saturn on the midheaven. This is the government trying to maintain its control. Mars on the ascendant. There is the anger and the attempt to assert itself, and this is what the government is doing. And of course, heliocentrically, we've got Mercury conjunct Pluto, opposition Pluto. So this is what the government is trying to do, and then the government is in the UK is under just more and more pressure. And just one really wonders where it's going. And I understand there have been recent opinion polls which have put reform ahead, or even though there's not an election it doesn't have to be an election for 4.5 years, but still it does put the pressure on the UK. And same with Paris and France. Again, I don't know precisely what's been recently going on in France, but I would have said the next few weeks between now and the solstice, now and the equinox, is certainly going to be a difficult time for France. Indeed, a difficult time for both countries. And I just finally wanted to very quickly talk about Mercury trine Jupiter. We do have Mercury trine Jupiter, and so what is Mercury trine Jupiter actually about? I mean, what does it what does it mean? What can we expect? I mean, I don't think I've got the exact chart for Mercury trine Jupiter. I'm not going to really set that chart up, but there is Mercury. Mercury is about the message. It can be about news. We see Jupiter as being something positive, and if you listen to my 12 signs, I was pretty positive about what it meant, about Jupiter. Good news, opportunities. But Jupiter can just be a release. Something comes out into the open, and we realize it, and the message is out, and the message spreads quickly, and that might be a manifestation of how Mercury Jupiter works. And so I thought it'd be a good idea to just look at some events. I'm not going to look at people with Mercury trine Jupiter. I'm just going to look at some past events which had Mercury trine Jupiter. And one event was, remember those fires in Hawaii, which were August 2023, these devastating fires in Hawaii. And I think this was the approximate time when those fires started in Lahaina in Hawaii. And Mercury was at 1912 Virgo, and Jupiter was at 14 Taurus. And you could see that the moon had just made a conjunction to Jupiter. You know, moon-Jupiter conjunctions are supposed to be fortunate, aren't they? But in this case, Mercury trine, you could say Mercury trine Jupiter is just about maybe things spreading. Maybe the word spreads, maybe the fire spreads, although this is in Earth signs. It's Mercury in Virgo trine Jupiter in Taurus. And it certainly became a major global news story, these fires in Hawaii. And one thing that is interesting with this Mercury trine Jupiter, that we're in the build-up for Mercury trine Jupiter, we've got this obsession now in terms of American politics with executive orders. Trump's executive orders. He seems to have executive orders all the time. And as Mercury has been starting to make this trine to Jupiter, we have got more and more executive orders. And maybe this is about Mercury trine Jupiter, because one of the most notorious executive orders in American history was Executive Order 9066. So here is the chart for Executive Order 9066, which happened on February the 19th, 1942. And so this was just after the start of the Second World War, and this was when Roosevelt had his executive order that American citizens of Japanese ethnicity be arrested and taken, well, not arrested, I don't know what the word was, interned, and taken to internment camps. And so this happened with Mercury trine Jupiter. And this Mercury trine Jupiter, if you look at Executive Order 9066 on February the 19th, 1942, and you actually compare it with the positions at the moment, let me just... Mercury is actually very close to where it was on February the 19th, 1942, and Jupiter was also very close. In fact, we've almost got a Jupiter return. So it's just interesting that we have this infamous executive order during the Second World War, American citizens getting rounded up and sent to internment camps. And also we've got a rash of Trump's executive orders. Now, I'm not making a political comment here. I'm not making any opinion about whether or not those Trump's executive orders are good or bad. Maybe a case of some being good, some being bad, because he's making so many. But I just thought that was an interesting coincidence, and I somehow think that Trump's executive orders are kind of tied up with the growing power of this Mercury-Jupiter trine. Now, Mercury-Jupiter is about communication, and an organization that is very, very good at communicating is Hamas. Hamas formed December the 14th, 1987, and Hamas had Mercury, I don't know exactly what time, but it was during one of the intifadas, and Mercury was at 16 Sagittarius, Jupiter was at 19 Aries. So Hamas as an organization is very good at propagandizing its cause and getting people around the world to support it, even in the face of Hamas's own atrocities. For example, in the run, with the October the 7th events in October the 7th of 2023, when they did this incursion and with all their atrocities, but still Mercury trine Jupiter, they were able to keep up the propaganda machine. So you could say that Hamas is a good example of an organization that is making effective use of Mercury trine Jupiter. And I want to finish with a couple of a couple of tragedies. One tragedy would be the assassination of Kennedy. Now remember, this is not just this is the exact chart of the assassination of Kennedy. It was also, remember, Aldous Huxley died on November the 22nd, 1963, and so did C.S. Lewis. But Mercury trine Jupiter, Mercury was very exactly trine Jupiter on the assassination. And it's not so much perhaps that the Mercury-Jupiter assassination was really correlates with Kennedy's death. You don't really associate Mercury trine Jupiter with a death necessarily, but it was about the news. So when you got this event, Mercury trine Jupiter, this was one of the most powerful pieces of news. What were you doing when Kennedy was assassinated? I don't know what I was doing. I was 18 months old, so I can't really remember what I was doing when Kennedy was assassinated. But I assume I was somewhere in southeast England. But I can't remember that. I mean, I've got a good memory, but my memory doesn't go that far back. But Mercury trine Jupiter is the news. Jupiter is a planet of death. And of course, Aldous Huxley and C.S. Lewis were celebrated writers. And Jupiter, you could say Jupiter trine Mercury is the death of writers. And the easy death of writers, I'm not sure about C.S. Lewis's death. As we know with Aldous Huxley, he died when he was on LSD, and apparently, maybe he was having a good time. He was injected with LSD just before his death, and so that was his death. With very Mercury trine Jupiter death, I would have said. So that's one way of looking at Mercury trine Jupiter. And finally, a big tragedy, atrocity, was the 1972 Munich Olympics when, I get mixed up, was it Black September? This Palestinian group broke into the Olympic compound and killed and took hostage a load of Israeli athletes. And on September the 5th, 1972 in Munich. And Mercury was very close to the trine of Jupiter. So again, you have a news story. I mean, that's what it's about. It gripped the attention of the world, like the assassination of Kennedy, 9 years earlier. Is it 9 years earlier? Yeah. So that's Mercury trine Jupiter. And, you might also want to consider, what else was going on at the time of that Mercury trine Jupiter. Well, Mercury trine Jupiter, there was also a Sun-Mars conjunction at the time of the attack. And so Sun-Mars, of course, really does fit the attack, doesn't it? I mean, that is an attack, Sun-Mars in Virgo in the first house, but with Mercury rising here. And if you look at the midpoints with this, so the Sun-Mars midpoint would be about 2027. So if you look at the midpoints at the time, sorry if this is difficult to see, let's just look at it. Let me just finish by looking at some midpoints here. If you look at the see there's a Sun-Mars conjunction at 13. I mean, I'm just switching back to cardinal at 13.3 Virgo, and the Mercury-Jupiter conjunction. The Mercury-Jupiter trine, its midpoint. So the midpoint of the Mercury-Jupiter trine was here at 2902 cardinal. I'm just switching everything to the 45-degree dial. So, and the Sun-Mars was, so they were within 1 degree of each other on the 90-degree dial. And we can actually look at this in terms of the 90-degree dial. Let me just so let's just finish with this chart. And so there's the Mercury. So you can see that there's a Sun-Mars conjunction, and that Sun-Mars conjunction you can see that Sun-Mars conjunction you can see the symmetry there. Or at least that's the Mars, and Mars is on the Mercury-Jupiter midpoint and also on the ascendant. So you can see how the Sun-Mars conjunction and that Mercury trine Jupiter at the time of the attack on the Israeli athletes, were really aligned with each other. So Mercury Jupiter, okay, you could say from a rather unpleasant point of view, Mercury trine Jupiter sort of kind of facilitates the success of this terrorist action. You might say that, but it might just also be about the news of this act of violence. So those are a few thoughts about Mercury trine Jupiter. So I don't think on a global sense we should necessarily see Mercury trine Jupiter as being particularly positive. I think on a personal level, in terms of our own lives, as I tried to demonstrate when I looked at the 12 signs, I think Mercury trine Jupiter is a fortunate aspect, but in a global sense, maybe not so much. But just because past events had Mercury trine Jupiter doesn't mean that anything bad is going to happen over the next couple of days. I'm not suggesting that, but I thought it'd be just a good idea to explore that aspect. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.